Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Turning Towards Life. This is Lizzie and Justin. This is our ongoing Thirdspace coaching project, which is a real regular joy for Justin and I. Thank you so much for being here with us as well. The fact that you're here means that this happens, really. And we are having a look at one of Justin's sources today called A Very Narrow Bridge from the teachings of Nachman of Bratslav, which I'm very, very excited about. And I want to welcome you all to this conversation, which, as you know, is unrehearsed and live. Somebody asked a question about whether I knew Justin was going to bring this source this week. And always just to say, Justin and I don't kind of confer. We post our sources and the other one learns of them at the time they get posted, so it's just as much a surprise for me as it is for all you listeners who have just seen The Very Narrow Bridge being posted by Justin on Friday. And it's a real joy to then spend the Saturday in a normal way, but having this little very narrow bridge in my mind and reflecting on it and wondering about it. So yeah, this is unrehearsed and live between us today, and it's a Sunday in approaching winter time in London, and it's a real joy to be talking about this properly, Justin, because I know we've mentioned it many times, and actually to see where it's from and to see this little passage is really beautiful. So thank you for bringing this, and thank you everybody for being here to be in this conversation with us.
You're welcome, Lizzie. Good morning, everybody. Before we get on to the source, I was leading our 2-day Foundations of Coaching program on Monday and Tuesday, and I wanted to bring it in now because it was so very beautiful to be in close. We run, as of course you'll know, Lizzie, but for everyone else, small groups studying together really what it is to be human, and then how we might work in support of ourselves and other human beings to step more fully and lovingly and courageously and skillfully into our lives. And so I wanted to mention it now because very often we only say in the couple of weeks ahead of it that it's coming up. But we have Foundations of Coaching coming up in February and in May of next year. And if you're interested, you could go and check us out on wearethirdspace.org. But the other reason I'm mentioning it now is that we had a conversation about Turning Towards Life being live, Lizzie, this week as I was telling people about it. And there's a wonderful person in the group who said, "What, you're really live? You don't rehearse this?" No, but we ended up talking about trust and about, how much it seems to me, and this is relevant to the source that we're going to head into, really all of our human lives are a great big improvisation. Most of the time, we don't know exactly what's going to happen from the actions that we take. And certainly when it comes to other people, we don't know. We might think we like to know, or we might imagine that we have certain kinds of control. And it's one of the things I love about doing this, being in this practice with you, Lizzie, is the unrehearsed nature of it, and the letting each other in on the sources only a day or so before is really a way of modeling and practicing what human life is. And I think that the realness of this conversation between us, which I know so many people who join us live or listen in later feel, the realness is because it is real in that way. That is the part of the realness of human life, is that we never really know. And can we let ourselves, can we be courageous enough to not try and control it all and see what happens? And I know that that's what we're doing.
Was the person who asked the question about it being rehearsed, are they a person who listens?
No, I don't think so. Okay. Not yet.
Because I'm thinking that if you do listen, it's kind of obvious that it's not rehearsed, and it couldn't be in a way.
Yes, right. Yeah. But I appreciated the question. I appreciated the possibility of talking about what it is to trust.
Yeah. I'd also like to see what it is like to rehearse this.
Like, I wonder how we would do it. I know. It's a special rehearsed episode. So I have a cold this week, so you can probably all, if I sneeze and splutter my way through, everyone, particularly those of you who are listening on headphones, I apologize. I will try and mute myself. And here is our source. So this is from, you said it so beautifully, Lizzie, Nachman of Bratslav. Nachman was a Jewish spiritual teacher from the Hasidic movement, which was born in the 17th, 18th century. And I'll just say a tiny little bit about it before the source, because it's something that's been so inspiring and helpful for me. They, like many spiritual paths in different communities, got onto joy as the central practice. So from what the little I understand about Sufism, for example, in Islam, it's got some similarities there with this sense that it's our work to come at life as joyful as we possibly can. So, and Nachman said he taught many, many things, and he said many things, and most of what he said was written down by other people. I don't think he actually wrote anything himself. So this is actually what we're going to read is a little compendium of bits and pieces. It wasn't all said in this order in one way, in one go. So it's called A Very Narrow Bridge. Joy is not incidental to spiritual quest. It is vital. If you never want to see the face of hell, when you come home from work every night, dance with your kitchen towel, and if you're worried about waking up your family, take off your shoes. And know that in life, every person has to pass over a very narrow bridge. And the most important thing is not to internalize or amplify our fear.
A very narrow bridge. Joy is not incidental to spiritual quest. It is vital. If you never want to see the face of hell, when you come home from work every night, dance with your kitchen towel. And if you're worried about waking up your family, take off your shoes. And know that in life, every person has to pass over a very narrow bridge. And the most important thing is not to internalize or amplify our fear.
Like many people's teachings, this is very short, but it has so much in it.
Yeah.
And the place that I want to begin with, both parts of it, really, both parts of this are very powerful for me. The second part I've mentioned many times in the 113 weeks we've been doing this, Lizzie, as you know, but the line about the very narrow bridge. I know for myself that, and I particularly find it now, I'm trying to make decisions about how much and how often I want to read the news as is presented to us. And in some ways I want to read it very often because I feel like I want to be tuned into the world. And in other ways, I know that what I read in the news is someone's selection, and very often a selection that draws attention to certain parts and not other parts. But there's no doubt that in my mind that quite aside from anything that's going on right now, you know, we're in a couple of weeks away from an election here in the UK, and all kinds of things going on. We're also in the inescapable human state of things being very uncertain for us. So we're uncertain about what will happen, particularly with the climate catastrophe that looks like it's unfolding, and we're uncertain about what will happen with politics, and we're uncertain about what will happen with our own bodies. I've got a cold, which is nothing, but I've been feeling into over the last couple of nights that it's been difficult to sleep, and I've been feeling sore, and I've been feeling into the deep uncertainty it is to be a biological being, that we don't know what's going to we don't know what's going to come. We don't know if it's going to be a cold or something much more serious for us, and we don't know what's going to happen to the people we love. It strikes me that frankly, as I'm saying this, Lizzie, it strikes me that we really know almost nothing compared to, we know this much of this much. And that means that we're always in a very precarious situation. And we do whatever we can to feel solid and secure in our precariousness, which I think is absolutely right to do. And sometimes we make try to feel secure by amassing physical comforts or money in a bank or something, which can be very helpful. But none of them take away from the inherent perilousness of our lives. And so I really, really am moved by, actually, as the first thing, moved by Nachman's suggestion that the most important thing that we should do in the midst of all of that is to dance. And it's to dance with a tea towel. I mean, it's hilarious. And it's really beautiful because it's really ordinary. It's such a deep celebration of the straightforward, whatever is here, ordinariness, and how I've never really thought about it this way before, Lizzie. I'll say this bit and see what happens for you. Our perilous situation and how absolutely extraordinary the ordinary and I can't even say it, the ordinariness of things is. They're intimately connected. There's something about the ordinary being so unknowable. And that's the same thing that keeps us at risk all the time. So what are we going to do in the middle of it? Are we going to worry our way through? Or are we going to find a way to practice dancing in it? Because it's not like the worrying makes anything better. I mean, this is what I found out from many years of trying that one.
Yeah, I too am so appreciating the invitation to joy. And just that first line, the reminder of joy, and then the second part as well, of the ordinary practice of joy being vital to this path that we're on. For me, the word joy also invites this way of reflecting that's not like when it all turns out I'll be happy kind of thing, but joy can live amidst things, amidst all of the life, all of the ordinariness, all of the frightenedness and the worrying. And I think it links as well to the end where it says that we're not to internalize or amplify our fear. To practice joy is also to practice not doing that always. And I too know that somehow I have these kind of nonsensical thoughts of, well, if I worry about this, it might get better. And of course, I've also learned that the worrying about stuff doesn't change anything. It's just worrying and being frightened of things. And so to infuse my life with joy feels like a way through life that fulfills something much deeper than just if I keep worrying all the time. Even though I think my worry is going to abate some terrible thing happening, like I'm staving it off by worrying or being scared of it. If I'm just in that state, I forget really to have a good life, to have a life that I feel is fulfilling for me. So I love this invitation to joy, and the fact that it's linked to spirituality as well feels very meaningful to me, because I think I have a really deep dedication to my spiritual path, my path through life as a spiritual being. And I feel like if I didn't dedicate myself to joy in quite a large part, that would almost be impossible. Like my personality, the fearful part of me, the worrying part, it can get a hold of me so easily. And this, when I was thinking about this yesterday as well, I was thinking that it really articulates this, what I call in my world as my choice between faith and fear. being afraid and being faithful, and choosing faith as much as I can kind of dilutes the fear in a way. Like it becomes something I can relate to as my being frightened, rather than I am the fear myself. Like it gives me some bandwidth that exists between just worrying all the time and feeling okay about my life. Like the joy part gives the breathing space around the fear so that I can hold it in its rightful place, rather than have it as, oh, this is who I am and this is how I define myself and this is what I act from and this is where I make my decisions from. And so I love this invitation to this ordinary joy, because it is really possible. And actually when I look at my life, the moments where I could experience joy are very, very many. Like the moments that are possible for that to have it in them, there's thousands and thousands of them. And I could spend the majority of my day dancing with a tea towel, because actually the majority of my day is not dealing with the things that are really, really difficult in reality. I mean, I could make my day that, because there's plenty to worry about and plenty to be frightened of. But it's like you limiting the news. It's like I have my own news as well, like not just the world's news, but my own world news, which is the way I'm messing something up, the way I'm failing, the way I'm currently being a bad mother, the way I'm ruining food because I've forgotten about it, the way that I don't have enough money, the way that I'm, all of the things that I could be completely focusing on if I wanted to, all of the hours of the day. I could just spend 20 minutes on them and that'd be quite enough focus on them. And this invitation to joy feels like it's reorienting me to realizing that I'm a being with choices. And if I look at the worry that's really necessary, because worry is sometimes really helpful too, and I don't want to throw it out, because actually it helps me to focus on things and to realize what needs to be done and attended to that's important and all those kind of things. But if I filled my life with just that, it wouldn't feel like a very joyful one. And so I'm just appreciating the way that this invitation is having me see that I can allow that joyfulness, that dancing with the tea towel, to be in many more moments, and I can put the other stuff down and it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to disappear because I'm not worrying about it. My concerns were probably not going to change, but it just means that when I come at them, I'm going to be infused with something more than just that, which is going to help me with that. And I feel like that's the lovely invitation here, is as well as to not amplify our fear, but to make joy vital. And actually, joy and vital, those two words, there is a vitality that comes with joy as well, that feels like it enables us to not internalize and amplify our fear so much.
There's so much in what you're saying, and the parts that strike me most immediately are remembering, as Nachman is reminding us, that there's choice in this. Because I know that the trap that I get into, well, I was sitting in the cinema last Sunday night, and as you know, Lizzie, we've talked about before, I've said here before, I have a body mind that very, very easily gets into exactly the thing that Nachman says we shouldn't do, which is to amplify. So I'm with you, fear has its place. And there's nothing in this that feels to me like a kind of turning away. Oh, well, I'll just push away this kind of feeling so I can have this kind of feeling, because that's ends up shallowing and narrowing our lives. But I was in the cinema and I could feel my terror, which was nothing to do with the film, building and building and building and building and building and building. And I suddenly I don't know what was going on, what I saw or remembered. I remembered something, and I remember that I didn't have to do this.
Mm.
And I said to myself, okay, this ends here now. I am not going to continue amplifying. Enough. And it was one of those moments, and sometimes this happens, where it was like turning on a, sort of a turnaround. And I stopped feeling afraid. I stopped feeling filled up with terror, almost instantaneous. Such was my genuine commitment to not keep on fueling myself. And what it was replaced by was a wave of great joy of being in the cinema and being with Davina and having being alive and being well enough to do this and being in a world where I could and being with another person who I love and all of that joy, which is not the same as feeling happy. I did feel very happy actually in that instance, but joy isn't happiness. Joy is, seems to me, is a kind of deep appreciation of the extraordinary conditions of even something very ordinary. And joy came washing in, which I was very grateful for. And I was very grateful for the reminder, for my finding my way back to remembering this, because one of the reasons I think this piece from Nachman is so important, why even say it? It's because, at least for me, I'm sure this is true for other people, it doesn't always feel like I have any agency or any choice in this. I feel like fear is happening to me and it's sort of a given, because isn't that the way emotions are? They just happen. And there is a part of emotions that does just happen, but then there's the whole how I respond to the happening that's happening. I can't, if I were to attempt to control it, it would be another way of attempting to control life, but what I do next is what's vital. So this part that you're bringing up about how much choice that we have, and also that one of the things I heard in what you were saying is that it's practice that can really help us. So it's helpful not to think about, I think there are such limits to the way that we think about our own agency, our own capacity to have things done. We often think that there's this thing called willpower that we ought to muster on our own at every circumstance. And of course there is such a thing, I think. But very often what has us find our way into feeling into the joy of something is the practice of dancing with a tea towel, or is the practice of speaking to another person who we trust, or is the practice of going outside and looking at the sky, or lying on the ground, on the floor, and feeling the earth supporting us. Or there's a million things that we could do. And that's part of what it is to be on a spiritual path as well, to be faithful, is to walk in a way that can support us. And it's also, Lizzie, why I think that this metaphor of walking a very narrow bridge is such a brilliant one, because it reminds us that what we're doing anyway is walking. We didn't get a choice in this. We're walking it whether we like it or not. And we're not just static on it. We're walking, and we could fall at any time. That's the precariousness. And we didn't choose it. And I know that in my most unhelpful to my own life and to other people's lives moment, I can get into a kind of, it's a sort of resentment. How dare anybody put me in this situation? This isn't what I chose. This isn't what I signed up for. So I'm going to be resentful and angry and very, very afraid. But then Nachman says to us, well, you're walking. We have to walk. So then the question is how to walk. Mm-hmm. There really are a lot of ways of walking over something that's narrow. Even as I'm saying this to you, I can feel the part of me that gets filled up with joy that we even get the chance to have the chance to walk this, narrow and precarious as it is, coming from a great mystery and going to a great mystery that we really don't know anything about. But here we are walking. Oh my goodness. It's terrifying, and it can be exhilarating if we'll bring ourselves that way.
Yeah. Also, Justin, I can't help but what you just said really brought up the choices I had giving birth to little Vesper. And for anyone who has birthed a baby but also just done anything that's challenging, really, really challenging, and you carried on walking and haven't run away. I mean, the thing about birth is that you can't run away, and it has to be completed. So you can't decide not to do it. It's you're committed whether you like it or not, which is a little bit like every person has to pass over a very narrow bridge. It's like you can't not do the thing that you're that you're in. It's like you either have an argument with it, but it still has you anyway, or you find a way to be with it and you go with it. And I've been in reflection on this bit of writing, Justin. I've really felt that I'm not sure if I can describe it, but when I read just a very narrow bridge in relationship to being human, a really big feeling comes over me of how narrow that bridge is, and what it takes for me, and what it took for me, particularly in birth, to be in the narrow bridge, as in, and the narrow bridge as I've encountered it and see it, is the how to describe it. It's like staying so present to what's happening that are as a practice, so that my mind can't go where it's kind of willing me to go. Like in the process of laboring, I could tell that I had the option to completely freak out and be completely mad, because it was such an extraordinary experience. It was so unfamiliar to me, and all kinds of sensations were happening that were unfelt by me before in my life. And I could feel that there was a route I could go which was absolutely petrified and hysterical and ungrounded and mad, basically, like flailing around like a mad person. Or I could stay really, really, really close to my experience and be in the narrow bridge and treat it as just that. And it showed me that doing that is possible. Like there were so many paths I could have taken of feeling afraid, and all of our cultural narratives about birth are so thick and layered onto us through our lives, to the point where we're all petrified of birth generally. Like, if I met a pregnant woman yesterday, and I could tell in her eyes she was absolutely frightened of the fact that birth was going to come, and such a shame that that's where our world has got to, but it has. So there's a hell of a lot of undoing to do there, but it makes the narrow bridge kind of relatively even narrower when you've got all of these cultural narratives about what it means and how frightening it is and how painful it is and all those things. And I had the option all the time to internalize and amplify my fear. Like it was right on a plate, like right there with all of the stories I had. And what I realized in the process was that I had a choice. And it was a repeatedly difficult choice to make, but I made it again and again and again and again. And I kind of sometimes strayed off of it, but I knew I had to come back to presence, to being right there with it. A little bit like, have you ever been surfing, Justin? It's like, I mean, I'm not a surfer, but I know what it's like to be beaten up by a wave versus what it's like to be taken by one. And when I've been taken by a wave before, and it's been quite a big one that I thought might smash me to the floor and hold me under or whatever, there's a choice to stay on the wave, because it's also quite scary being taken by life itself. But to be taken by life itself is to not be completely munched by this huge big wave that's just behind. And it feels like that's a way of speaking about this narrow bridge as well, is that it would be so easy to collapse back into the froth and just be taken, because I'm scared of kind of being on the front of something. But there's a way of being on that narrow bridge that's very, very, very life-giving. But also we have to learn to tolerate joy, to tolerate life itself, to tolerate what the consequences of staying present and staying in this practice of joy. Like you said, to dance with a tea towel, some of us feel like way too self-conscious to dance or to move or to stand still in the street and stare at the sky when everyone else is doing. I can feel in myself like, oh, actually to be joyful is quite counter to our narrative of, even if you ask somebody how they are, it's much easier to tell a disaster story than to tell a story of joy and contentment. And it feels like to pass over this very narrow bridge is to also be telling a different story about life. We have to get used to that, and we have to practice that so that our nervous systems can be okay with joy, and to not be complaining all the time and taking great kind of pride out of our complaints and our difficulties and our problems. And it has a place where it has us be able to join in with other people, and to be social is to be with others in a similar way, I think. And this is a different invitation to that.
I'm so grateful that you're bringing in your experience of giving birth to Vesper, Lizzie, because of course, I can't know that experience firsthand because I have the wrong kind of body for it. But it's clear to me, from having been at the birth of 3 children, that this is one of those great passages in life where we find out in a very full-on physical way that we're walking this narrow bridge all the time, and the unavoidability of it, just like you say. And it's a great gift that you're bringing it here to us. And as we come to the end of this week, it seems to me that we're opening into a topic that I hope we'll come back to at some point. So one is, actually I can think of 2 different angles on it, which I'll say now. One is noticing that we live in a culture which places fear in the middle of things. I don't think many of us even realize that we've chosen together to put fear in the center in our wider culture, and not joy and not love. It's like a taken for granted. You should be afraid. You should be afraid of all of it, of other people, of politics, of what will happen, of climate, and you should amplify your fear. And in all the work I do in organizations at the moment, even the idea that we might give up our being afraid of one another and give up our contracted amplifying something to come at life a different way is so hard for so many people. And I think that that's in our wider culture, and this really this is what Nachman is reminding us of. But the second thing is something that we've spoken about many times, Lizzie, is that was brought to me when you were talking to someone else who was pregnant. It really struck me. We're all on the narrow bridge together. We're not on our own. And so one of the ways in which we can follow Nachman's invitation for joy and for not amplifying our fear to be part of our path is to do that with others. That's part of the faith that's called for, is none of us, every person has to pass over a very narrow bridge, and we all have to, and we're all doing it together. And when we remember that, all kinds of possibilities open up.
Yeah.
So I know that this project is an expression of all of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So I think we should close. And I want to say thank you to you, Lizzie, and thank you again to everyone who's with us, whether you're just beginning or whether you've been with us for 113 weeks. We are equally grateful that you're here. And our plan is to be back next Sunday as normal.
And just very quickly before we go, I and also my sister Holly we are doing a small event called Turning Towards Love, which is our monthly gathering, and it's on the 9th of December from 7 till 9 p.m. in Hammersmith at a place called Recenter. And you can find all the details of that at recenter.co.uk. If you go to the events section, you can see that we are there, and you can book online. And it's a very small gathering, and I know some people will be listening to this who normally come. It's very beautiful, very intimate and very safe. And if you fancy coming along and sharing and being with us for a couple of hours on a Monday night, please do come. It's the 9th of December, 7 till 9 p.m. and it's in Hammersmith.
Great. Thank you, Lizzie. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
See you
everybody.
soon.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.